In the previous section, you learned all about the white keys of the piano keyboard, how to find them, how to label them. And in this next section, you're going to learn how those white keys correspond to actual written musical notation. Now, before we get into that, just wanted to quickly review here at the bottom of page 14 just this general trend, which I'm sure you've noted in previous segments. On the piano keyboard, it is operating on a horizontal axis, right? From left to right, going from the left, you have lower pitches, and on the right, you have higher pitches. So it's operating on a horizontal axis, low stuff on the left, high stuff on the right. Now, on paper, when you're actually writing out music or you're reading music, it makes perfect sense. The high notes are actually going to be up high, and the low notes are actually going to be down low. So it's operating on a vertical axis. So looking at the example on the next page, doesn't matter what clef you're in, these notes are relatively high on the page. They're just vertically higher than these. So these notes are your high notes and these notes are lower notes. So just keep that in mind as you begin to map out these trends. Now, you've seen this symbol many times already in the text where we have these like 5 parallel lines. That's what's called officially a staff. The musical staff, as it says here, it's a set of 5 lines and in fact 4 spaces contained within those lines. So looking back up here, these are the 5 lines, of course, and then the 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, are the little slots in between the lines. And this grid, if you will, defines precise locations of pitches. Now, it kind of makes sense that given what we said, 5 lines and 4 spaces, there are therefore 9 possible slots for notes to live in. So a note can live on any of the 5 lines. So here's a note on that first line, second line, third line, fourth line, fifth line. So a note could live in any of those locations, or it could live in any of the 4 spaces. So here's a note there on the first space, second space, third space, fourth space. So those are the possible locations. Now here's the rule about the staff. Anytime you go from one location or one slot to the very next one, up or down, you go either forward or backward in the alphabet by 1 letter. So let's take this as an example. Here we have a note on the first line of the staff. Now I'm just calling it an E. We haven't yet gotten to clef, so we don't know officially what certain notes are, which notes are going to live where. But what we do know is that if this is an E right here, then the very next slot up, which is the next space, is going to be an F, the next letter in the musical alphabet. And if we know that this one is an F, well, certainly the next slot up is going to be the note G. And then, of course, you'll remember from the previous segment that once we get to G, we cycle back in our musical alphabet. So if we're going from this note up to here, the very next slot, this one, if this was a G, this one goes up to an A for that second note there. So consecutive letters go in consecutive slots, and it makes sense. When you're going up, you're going forward in the alphabet. When you're going down, you're going backward in the musical alphabet. Now, one thing you may have noticed as I was drawing these notes over here is that these 9 locations are referred to by their line or space, and we always count from the bottom up. So, for instance, this is the first line, this is the second line, third line, fourth line, fifth line, as we said before, first space, second space, third space, fourth space. So that's just a convention to be aware of. Now, as I'm sure you know, music is certainly not restricted just to 9 notes or 9 slots. You can go super high, you can go super low, and when you go a little bit beyond this 5th line note, the very next note is actually going to live right here, just resting right on top of the staff. If you want to go below the first line note, you're going to go right here, where this note is just resting right below the staff. Now, that takes us up to 11 notes. We certainly can have many more notes than that. And so when you go really high, as you do up here, or really low, as you do down here, you need to construct ledger lines. So these are just temporary extensions of the staff. It's saying like, well, these notes don't really fit on the staff, but let's extend that staff with a few horizontal lines, and let's just incorporate a really high or really low note that way. Now, here's a really important point, and this will help you, especially when you get to, for instance, scales and chords later in the course. You'll notice that we always have this pattern of alternating line and space notes. So back when we were dealing with just the regular notes on the staff, this note here, not only is it officially located on the first line, but we can just call it more generically a line note. This note is a space note. Why? Because it's living in between two lines. This one's a line note, this is a space note, and so on. So there's always an alternation between line and space. That even extends to when we are doing these ledger lines. So let me clear this off here so I can explain up on the top here. This note is a line note, of course. This next note, it has to be a space note. So that's why we're just letting it rest on top of the staff. We're not bisecting it with any horizontal lines. We're just letting it rest there. Now, given that that one was a space note, the next note has to be a line note. So that's why we have drawn a line through that note. We say, well, it's not this one, it's the one above it, because it's a line note above that previous space note. Now the next one, you better believe it's going to be a space note. So here we've constructed that ledger line as a placeholder. Say like, no, it's not lower, it's actually still going up, but we're letting it rest on top so that it looks like a bona fide space note. And you can derive the same principles from looking at these notes on the lower end. So line, space, no matter if you are on the staff or if you are temporarily above or below the staff. And that's where we'll leave it for this video. In the next one, we'll go on to the treble clef.